Welcome to Power Talks with Santosh Sir. Today we have with us a special guest, Her Excellency Verena Grafin Von Roedern, the Ambassador of Germany to Nepal. Germany is famed for its leadership in innovation, science and technology, and philosophy. Germany also reminds us of the disastrous World War II and how quickly Germany rebuilt itself to become one of the world's leading economy and prosperous nation. Your Excellency, post-World War II, how did Germany reconstructed itself in becoming Europe's leading economy and populous nation?
First of all, let me stress that in a few weeks' time we will actually celebrate the 60th anniversary of our basic law. This is what our constitution is called, and the founding of our Federal Republic of Germany, namely on the 23rd of May. Germany went through a consistent process of restructuring politically but also economically. We drafted our basic law, founded our Federal Republic of Germany, guaranteed law and order, and all this eventually led to a good investment climate and laid the base for our continuing economic growth. As our industrial base was being more or less destroyed, this gave us also the opportunity to build some of the most advanced industrial facilities. That's what often people stress, that probably others had outdated industrial facilities, but we were first forced to build really new ones. Due to the emerging Cold War, West Germany received strong financial aid by the Western Allies, so known as the Marshall Plan, and that one has to stress that it was not only the Germans alone who helped to sort of bring this economic progress. Another important point for the success of our country was the European integration. There was a growing consciousness that the economic integration and cooperation in Europe would avoid conflicts in the future and strengthen all economies. As a strong export nation, we strongly profited from the EU integration, as a large part of our exports actually go to our European partners.
And now the world is facing economic recession. And could this somehow affect the progress of your country?
Yes, there are many indicators which show that the German economy suffers severely from the worldwide financial crisis. For the current year, the German government expects the real GDP to decline by 6%. The government has reacted by putting forward an economic stimulus plan which is supposed to help the struggling economy to regain power. Though Germany's progress has slowed down, I would like to emphasize that our country is still one of the strongest economies in the world, and we are hopeful to get out of the current recession as soon as possible. But I think we also have an interest to sort of look at other countries and help other countries, because export nations is very dependent on what happens in other countries, not only in the region but worldwide.
Germany has been very supportive of the Millennium Development Goals of the United Nations. However, recently in Geneva, Germany withdrew itself from the UN Racism Conference. Why did Germany stop from participating in such an important conference?
Well, let me stress that the withdrawal was not an easy decision. And it was only taken on Sunday evening, the evening before the conference has started. But the German government had the concern that the conference was being misused as a platform for other than the intended interests. Germany is very ambitious to fight racism and discrimination and will continue to do so. And let me also stress that due to our past, we feel we have a certain responsibility in this field.
Your Excellency, you have served as Consul General in Karachi for 3 years. How do you see the recent invasion of Swat Valley by Taliban and its impact on global terrorism?
It's true, I've been a Consul General to Karachi from February 2003 to July 2006. I still have a lot of friends there, and I feel sad about the deteriorating situation in the country. And I also have to stress, you mentioned the Swat Valley. I went with friends, including Pakistani friends, to see the Swat Valley, which is a beautiful area of that country. I hope that actually the current government will be able, with the help of the international community, to eradicate once and forever all forms of terrorism. This obviously will be a long and uphill struggle. During my time, I witnessed the actual killing of an American diplomat by a suicide bomber. And that was someone whom I knew personally, and that really was a very, in Karachi, a very sad moment. But at the same time, let me stress, I also witnessed the friendship and hospitality of many Pakistani peoples, and even one little story that a very poor shepherd up in the mountains close to the Nanga Parbat base camp offered me a cup of tea, and I just felt so impressed by this, that this person who hardly earns any cash, still this hospitality, which is also part of their religion, meant that he was offering something. So I would really wish that these examples, that the hospitality in future will be the trademark of the people of that country.
In August 1990, a historic moment took place in Germany's history. The Berlin Wall was demolished and Germany was united. How significant was that event for the country's growth and the European integration?
Well, first of all, this was something a lot of people didn't expect to see in their lifetime. You know, I was at that time posted in Dublin. The evening itself, I didn't watch news, and suddenly the next morning, I couldn't believe what had happened. I myself, both my parents are refugees from what's now Poland, and so I had the chance to grow up in a free society. So for me, it was a happy moment because I felt the people in the former GDR also deserved to live in a free society. Concerning economy, of course, you have to say this was also first a Hercules task after unification to bring this part of Germany up to the same level as we had in the West. But I think in general, despite all talks which were there, the people were willing to help, and we still, I think, even after having been separated for several decades, we felt like one nation.
Your Excellency, will continue with our conversation after a short break. Do stay with us. Welcome back to Power Talks with Santosh Shah. We are in conversation with Her Excellency Verena Grafin Von Roedern, the Ambassador of Germany to Nepal. Your Excellency, Chancellor Angela Merkel chaired the G8 summit in 2007, and her focus was on the reduction of greenhouse gases. Recently, during the G20 summit held in London, she focused on, or she strengthened on, the economic crisis recovery. What were the major outcomes of G20 summit in context to Germany's contribution? Well,
first of all, it was obvious that the G20 summit had to focus on the economic and financial crisis, and I think it was very positive that the leaders of the G20 have agreed on certain actions. The G20 states have decided to install an effective surveillance of the international financial markets. The lack of the surveillance was considered as the root cause of the current crisis. You mentioned that Angela Merkel herself at a summit focused on greenhouse gases. Maybe I should mention in that context that she happened to be at one stage our Minister of Environment, and when we had as ambassadors a meeting with her, you could feel that her heart still beats for environmental issues.
In 2006 and 2007, Forbes magazine named the Chancellor Merkel as the world's strongest women leader. She is the first elected female Chancellor of Germany. As a successful women leader yourself, how do you feel about this success?
Well, first of all, I think that most women in Germany were proud to see that we finally had a female Chancellor. Also, her CV is quite interesting because, as you know, she grew up in the former GDR, even though she was born in the West, and she made it to the leader of our country. But I must also say I find it actually good that she doesn't really sort of stress on the fact being a woman. She stresses more on sort of her competence and trying to do the best for our country.
You're a successful diplomat, and we don't see many women leaders in the field of foreign service. What motivated you to join this field?
Well, I had an interest for foreign countries at an early age, which was probably triggered by the fact that my mother, before marrying, she lived for half a year in England, worked there as an au pair girl. The same, my half-sister, who's 10 years older. So by the time I was 10, I always said one day I want to be able to speak English, French, and Spanish, and do something where I can live live abroad and see a country not just as a tourist, but maybe also help to overcome some prejudices which might exist between people of different countries.
And how has your experience been so far, being a diplomat and traveling to different countries, especially South Asia?
Well, I think it has been a very enriching experience. I've been to very different countries. I've been altogether 3 times in this part of the world. My first foreign posting was Calcutta. Then, as mentioned before, I'd been to Pakistan, but I also have been to Ireland, Dublin, and to France, Paris. So it was a very diverse experience.
Your Excellency, you have traveled in Nepal extensively, and recently you travelled to Upper Mustang as well. How has your travelling experience been in Nepal, and how do you see the status of women in different parts of Nepal?
Well, first of all, I have to it's true, I have travelled in this country. I actually had even been once here as a tourist over 20 years ago. And I think nearly everyone knows that I love the mountain, that I love trekking. So I've been to the Annapurna base camp, and as you mentioned recently, to Upper Mustang. To Upper Mustang, I actually went with a travel agency who does already women empowerment. Our porters were women who were told not to have too much luggage. We try to restrict ourselves. But they also want to give women a possibility to work, to earn their own living. So I think that, particularly in the field of tourism, there is also big chances for women.
And how do you see the status of women in Nepal?
The status of women in Nepal, I think it is still an uphill struggle for them. You know, you have some powerful women, but of course it's well known that if you look at figures in education, there are still more, men who have not only gone to school, who are literate, who've gone to university. But I think things are slowly changing, and there are positive signs.
After the Constitutional Assembly was formed last year, we see that there are 33% women members. Could this be a sign that Nepal holds great prospect for women leadership or empowerment in the future?
Well, I think it's a first step, but one has to see it's only a first step, because, you're also aware of the fact that there are, members of the Constituent Assembly with different educational backgrounds. So I would like to see that we have programs there that the women are really empowered to also play an active role in the Constituent Assembly. And when you saw the first government formed, that already the 4 most important posts in the country in your country were taken up again by men. There were relatively few female ministers. So it's a first step, but there's still a long way to go.
Your Excellency, will continue with our conversation after a short break. Do stay with us. Welcome back to Power Talks with Santosh. We are in conversation with Her Excellency Verena Grafin Von Roedern, the Ambassador of Germany to Nepal. Your Excellency, you took your office in Nepal in July 2008, right after the Constitutional Assembly was formed here. And how do you see your role and Germany's continued support in the peace process, the drafting of the Constitution, and possibly the next parliamentary election as well?
Yes, I came indeed in a very interesting time. I actually came the day of the elections for the President and the Vice President. I saw the forming of the government. And we always have expressed our commitment to the peace process. For example, our development cooperation never stopped, even in difficult times of the insurgency. Concerning the constitution drafting, that's an issue of being a lawyer by training, which interests me very much. We have there, and we intend to continue implementing a special program through our agency GTZ. GTZ stands for German Technical Cooperation, to accompany the constitution drafting process together with our Nepalese partners. And we had members of your Constituent Assembly who went to Germany. They proceeded then actually also to Switzerland in order to get information about the German federal structure. Of course, we also federal state. But I always stress that you have to choose your own constitution. We can only familiarize you with our own experience, the experience we have made. I think the parliamentary election, this is still sort of in the distant future. But within the EU, we also express want that we sort of offer any help which would be maybe necessary in that field.
Excellency, the concept of federalism is very complicated, and how did our constitution writers take when they were studying or they were getting trained in Germany?
Well, I didn't get sort of direct feedback, but the first thing you have to see, our federal system, there's a totally different historic situation that there were a lot of kingdoms. For us, it was actually sort of coming together and not sort of changing from a more central system to a federal system. We have, there's mainly one regional language, so there are a lot of differences. I think it's more getting ideas about how you can sort of divide the power between the different levels and the whole functioning, what are core points in our constitution. I think that was the idea of it.
In the last 3 weeks, we have witnessed an unnatural political conflict in Nepal with the issue of Chief of Army leading to the resignation of our Prime Minister. How do you see the current political crisis in Nepal, and how will this affect the peace process and the democratic foundations?
EU head of missions and the American ambassador, we went to see the acting Prime Minister, we went to see also Kanal from UML, and we expressed our concern. We're just concerned about the peace process. We would wish to see a consensus government being formed. We also gave a clear signal that violence can't be tolerated, and I think the Prime Minister mentioned that in his press statement. We also mentioned the issue of the video, that we hope that that doesn't trigger again the fear of the so often mentioned hidden agenda, that there it was also very important that he went to the press. Yes, we would like to see that this crisis will be overcome as soon as possible.
Your Excellency, Germany has been very supportive of Nepal's development programs. Could you please tell us the focus that you have currently?
Well, first of all, the German Development Corporation focuses on 3 major areas. We have health and family planning, we have renewable energy, and we have local self-governance and civil society. So these are the focal points. But we have also now, besides Development Corporation, the Foreign Office also has certain programs. So in the field of human rights, this is actually now also has become a very important issue for us. Everyone knows the Bhakta, that we have been very much involved in Bhaktapur. It's one of the best-known cooperation projects between Nepal and Germany. We have the Bhaktapur Development Project, which included, and I have to stress also, socioeconomic development, and it's a great example of a successful work between our 2 countries.
Nepal has failed in its economy due to the decade-long conflict and civil war. But we're still rich in natural resources, and our prospects for agriculture and tourism is very high. Based on the successful model of your country, how do you suggest us that we can best utilize our resources and develop the agricultural and tourism sector?
You are already a very popular destination for German tourists, not only trekkers, but they're also people who are interested in the sort of the cultural sides you have to offer. You have the Nepal Tourism Year coming up in 2011. I think to achieve further growth in the field of tourism, first of all, the peace process should continue and not being hampered by the current political crisis. But I think also the infrastructure has to be improved, which doesn't mean that you need any 5-star hotels up in the mountains, but a certain infrastructure has to be put in place. And you mentioned also the other sector where you have huge potential, which is called water, hydropower. I think you only have tapped so far a very small percentage of what could be done in this field. And I think there are German investors who would be interested to come, but it means that some improvements are necessary also concerning the investment climate.
Excellency, let's hope that our younger generation takes innovative methods like the young generation in Germany did several years ago, and we are able to be a prosperous nation and strengthen democracy. With this hope, I wish you good luck and goodbye. See you next week the same time. Thank you for being with us.